The sky groaned with the weight of heavy gray clouds, and fat drops of rain began to splatter across the cracked sidewalks of East Hamilton. The park, once bustling with families and joggers, was now nearly deserted except for one small figure standing alone near the iron gate. 8-year-old Sophie Hartley held a flimsy cardboard sign close to her chest, shielding it as best she could from the drizzle. Written in purple marker, the letters were slightly smudged but still legible: "Puppy for sale, please help." At her feet, a golden retriever puppy no bigger than a loaf of bread huddled against a fraying pink blanket, trembling from cold and confusion. Sophie wasn't crying anymore. She had done plenty of that over the last 3 nights, when the fridge stayed empty and the heater didn't hum like it used to. When her mother's silence at dinner stretched longer than usual. When the lights finally shut off for good. Her mom had tried to hide it, smiling as she handed Sophie the last 2 slices of bread, pretending she wasn't hungry. But Sophie knew better. She had always watched her mother's eyes more than her words. They were losing everything. The layoff had hit hard and fast. Her mom, Lisa, once a cheerful and hopeful employee at Grantwell Industries, had come home one Friday with a brown envelope and hollow eyes. "Just downsizing," she had whispered to herself. "It's not personal." But Sophie saw the storm behind her mother's brave smile. Rent had piled up. Job applications went unanswered. And when the food pantry could only give so much, Lisa made the decision she never wanted to say aloud. They would have to let Chance go. Chance was the puppy they'd adopted just 6 months earlier, Lisa's surprise birthday gift to her daughter when she got her performance bonus. Sophie had never asked for much, and when she opened the little box to find a wiggly golden puff of joy staring back at her, she cried in her mother's arms. They had named him Chance because her mom had said, "Everyone deserves one. Even us." Now, here Sophie stood, offering up her best friend to strangers, hoping someone would love him enough to take him. Someone kind. Someone better off. She whispered gentle promises to him, petting his head with chilled fingers. "It's going to be okay, buddy. Mama says sometimes we have to be brave, even when we don't want to." The rain started falling harder. People passed by, eyes downcast. Some offered sympathetic looks. Most hurried past. A few gave her $1 or 2 but kept walking. No one stopped for Chance. No one really saw her until he did. A tall man in a black wool coat stepped out of a car nearby, walking briskly with a polished leather briefcase in one hand and a black umbrella in the other. His hair was neatly combed, his eyes sharp with the focused stare of someone constantly calculating time. But something, a sound, maybe just intuition, made him glance sideways. That's when he saw her. She stood there soaked to the bone, her sign limp, her cheeks red from cold, and her gaze filled with a hope so fragile it looked like it might dissolve in the rain. The puppy whimpered once. The man paused, confused. Then the small voice reached him through the patter of rain and the noise of the world. "Please buy our puppy." It stopped him cold. Something twisted inside his chest, not guilt exactly, but the uncomfortable stirrings of recognition. He blinked, trying to make sense of it. The child's eyes. That voice. There was something about her. And then it hit him. Lisa Hartley. He remembered the name. He remembered the face. She had been one of the many names on the layoff spreadsheet he had signed off months ago. He hadn't known anything about her personal life. Just that her department wasn't considered mission critical. Numbers, cost cuts, operational efficiency, that was all that mattered at the time. He hadn't realized his decision had a face. A child. A puppy. His feet moved without thinking. He walked toward her, each step slicing through a storm of regret he didn't yet fully understand. He knelt beside her, the umbrella shielding them both now. She looked up with eyes that shined not from tears, but from unwavering faith in people. "He's a good puppy," she said softly, "but Mama says we can't feed him anymore. She's trying real hard, but she's sad." The man opened his mouth, but no words came. She didn't recognize him. Not yet. That would come later. For now, all she saw was someone who might care. Someone who might help. And in that moment, something inside him began to crack open, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. To be continued in Chapter 2. Backhand index pointing right. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us how powerful one moment can be, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We promise to keep bringing heartfelt stories just like this to you. Inside the cafe, the windows fogged gently from the contrast of the warm air and the storm still weeping outside. The scent of roasted coffee beans and freshly baked bread wrapped around Sophie like a hug as she sat at the small corner table, her shoes squeaking against the tile. Chance sat curled in her lap, dry at last, and nuzzling into her sweater with sleepy eyes. She cradled her hot cocoa like it was treasure, warming her hands and trying to be polite even though her stomach growled softly with hunger. Across from her sat the man, the stranger who had stopped when no one else had. He had brought her in out of the rain, ordered her food without asking, and placed a warm blanket around her shoulders without a word. But now that they were both dry and still, she noticed the tightness in his face, like he was thinking hard about something too heavy for words. He watched her quietly, noting the way she smiled even when her eyes flickered with fatigue. There was a softness about her, but not weakness, something resilient, something brave. He could see that same quiet strength in her mother's old employee photo, the one attached to her HR file. Lisa Hartley had always arrived early. Always stayed late. Never complained, even when her department got the least recognition. The man, Nathan Grant, CEO of Grantwell Industries, hadn't thought much about her until now. In fact, he hadn't thought about any of the names he'd signed off on that day. But now, sitting in front of this child who looked so much like her mother, his decisions felt more than corporate, they felt human. He cleared his throat. "Your mom," he asked gently, "what does she do now?" Sophie looked up, spoon paused in her cocoa. "She cries a little sometimes, but she doesn't let me see. She's been going to job interviews. A lady at church helped her write a new resume. Mama says we'll be okay, but sometimes I hear her praying real hard in the kitchen." Nathan swallowed hard. There was no anger in Sophie's voice. Only quiet faith. That night, after dropping Sophie off at the small, rundown apartment complex she called home, he sat in his office for hours, ignoring calls, ignoring the news, ignoring the endless to-do list that usually dictated his life like a machine. He stared at the layoff list again, pulling it from archived files. Line after line of names. Human lives, like Lisa's. How many of them had children? How many had nowhere to go? He found himself staring at the picture he'd secretly taken of Sophie in the cafe, her with cocoa foam on her upper lip, her arms protectively curled around Chance. It broke something in him that he didn't even realize had hardened. The next morning, he contacted HR and legal. He set up a rehire proposal for Lisa Hartley. Not in her old department, but something better. A community liaison role that focused on helping displaced employees re-enter the workforce. He created a fund, seeded it himself, for emergency support for families affected by layoffs. And most controversially of all, he wrote a public letter. One that admitted fault. One that promised to do better. Lisa didn't know what to say when he knocked on her door 3 days later. She opened it expecting a delivery or a neighbor's complaint. Instead, she found the man she least expected. He didn't introduce himself as her former boss. He simply offered her a folder and a sincere apology. "I met your daughter," he said quietly. "She reminded me what I forgot a long time ago. That business isn't just numbers. It's people. I didn't see that before. I do now." Lisa's hand trembled as she took the folder. Inside was a job offer. More pay. Full benefits. Remote options for the first few months. Support. Respect. And a handwritten note from Sophie, which Nathan had asked her to write. "Thank you for giving my mom a chance." Tears spilled down Lisa's cheeks. For the first time in months, she didn't feel invisible. Weeks passed, and the changes began to ripple. Sophie went back to school with new shoes and a full lunchbox. Chance grew strong and healthy, no longer for sale, but now an official part of the family. Lisa flourished in her new role, helping others with dignity and understanding only someone who had been through it could offer. As for Nathan, his world changed, too. He still wore suits, still sat in boardrooms, but now he walked into them with a